Sobrang di ko pa mapaniwala. Maraming salamat sa suporta at sana patuloy yung suporta niyo sa akin. Kamusta mga kapong Pinoy? Surprise! Excited na akong imbitahin kayong lahat na manood sa mga laban ko sa Mubadala Abu Dhabi Open.
Where today we're unpacking the most explosive story in professional tennis right now. A tale that begins with absolute pandemonium at the Australian Open and ends with a nation holding its breath in Manila. Forget everything you think you know about tennis etiquette, polite applause, and genteel crowds sipping champagne in the stands, because what happened on a seemingly ordinary Monday in Melbourne shattered every convention the sport has ever held sacred. January 2026, Melbourne Park's second Monday of the tournament, and Court 6 became ground zero for what can only be described as a complete system failure of the Australian Open's infrastructure. But this wasn't about faulty wiring or collapsed seating. This was about the spectacular miscalculation of underestimating the power of an entire nation's passion channeled through one 20-year-old athlete. Security personnel found themselves overwhelmed as thousands of bodies pressed against barriers that groaned and threatened to give way. Fans scaled fences with the determination of people storming a fortress. Spectators dangled from railings like acrobats. And the collective roar of their voices carried across 3 courts to Rod Laver Arena, where the world's biggest stars could hear the thunder echoing through the grounds. Tournament officials scrambled in panic mode. Police were summoned to contain what looked like it might spiral into a genuine public safety crisis. And the fire marshal stood ready to shut down an entire section of the venue because capacity limits weren't just being stretched. They were being obliterated. What could possibly cause this level of chaos at what's supposed to be the Happy Slam, the most laid-back of the 4 Grand Slam tournaments? The answer is Alex Eala, a Filipino sensation who at world number 49 was assigned to a side court with capacity for only a few hundred spectators. And the Australian Open Organizing Committee learned the hardest possible lesson about what happens when you put a player who represents the hopes and dreams of 115 million people on a venue designed for anonymity. Michael Jang, a witness to the mayhem, captured the essence of the disaster perfectly when he stated that they had underestimated her impact by catastrophic margins, noting that the media attention surrounding this match dwarfed that of Grand Slam champions playing simultaneously on the main courts. The match itself ended in defeat, with Eala falling to American powerhouse Alicia Parks in a 3-set battle. But the scoreline was utterly irrelevant, because Court 6 on that day represented something far more significant than a single tennis match. It became the flashpoint for a revolution that announced the Philippines had crashed through the gates of elite tennis, and they weren't asking for permission anymore. Today we're diving into the complete saga of what's being called the Court 6 revolution, examining how that explosive energy has traveled 6,000 kilometers north to the capital city of Manila, where history is unfolding right now. And we're breaking down why Alex Eala's journey from that chaotic Melbourne scene to her home tournament represents one of the most compelling narratives in modern tennis. The mainstream sports media gave you the surface-level coverage. They reported the loss to Parks with a scoreline of 0-6, 6-3, 6-2. They mentioned the crowd issues in passing, but they completely missed the deeper story about the fear and confusion in the eyes of tournament organizers who suddenly realized their entire operational model had been exposed as inadequate for the new reality of global tennis. The Australian Open scheduling system operates on cold mathematical logic. Top seeds receive assignment to Rod Laver Arena or Margaret Court Arena, while lower-ranked and unseeded players get relegated to the outer courts that fans jokingly call the parking lot courts because of their distance from Masara. Main action in the minds of the tournament committee, Eala, despite breaking into the top 50, was just another rising player who didn't warrant premium placement, and in making that calculation, they forgot about Pusong Pinoy, a Tagalog phrase that translates literally to Filipino heart but carries a deeper meaning in the sports context, representing an almost militant dedication and fierce pride that Filipinos bring when supporting their own. The moment the tournament schedule was released, the massive Filipino diaspora in Australia, one of the largest immigrant communities in the country, mobilized with military precision. They didn't purchase tickets to watch Carlos Alcaraz or other marquee names. They bought ground passes specifically to follow Ella wherever she was assigned. By 10 in the morning, Court 6 had reached maximum capacity. By 10:30, the walkways surrounding the court were completely blocked by standing spectators. And by 11, the overflow crowd had spilled into designated dining areas that were supposed to be kept clear, transforming the entire sector into a fire hazard that made officials genuinely nervous. When Ella emerged onto the court, the sound that erupted wasn't the refined golf clap traditionally associated with tennis. It was the full-throated roar you'd expect at a basketball arena or a football stadium. A wall of noise so intense it felt like standing next to a jet engine during takeoff. And it immediately became clear that everything about this match would violate tennis's sacred traditions. Tennis culture is built on unwritten rules that govern spectator behavior. Silence must be maintained during points. Applause should be polite and measured, and both players deserve equal respect regardless of personal preferences. The Filipino crowd at Court 6 demolished every single one of these conventions with gleeful abandon. They cheered when Ella hit winners, which is acceptable. They cheered when she walked to her towel between points, which is unusual. And most controversially, they erupted in celebration when Alicia Parks committed double faults, which is considered deeply unsportsmanlike in traditional tennis circles. Media commentators condemned the behavior as classless and disrespectful to the sport's heritage, but the fans had a different perspective, arguing they were simply expressing genuine passion and that tennis needed to evolve beyond its stuffy elitist roots. Parks herself admitted in post-match interviews that the hostile environment had rattled her concentration, describing the experience as feeling like she was playing an away match in a Davis Cup final rather than in a neutral first-round Grand Slam encounter. And you can't blame her for feeling disoriented because this level of one-sided crowd support simply doesn't happen at major tournaments. The Court 6 collapse wasn't about physical infrastructure failing. It was about the collapse of the old world order in tennis, the moment when the sports establishment was forced to confront the reality that tennis no longer belongs exclusively to the traditional power nations and the polite, upper-class audiences who have dominated the sport for generations. While Ella lost the match because Park's serve was simply too powerful that day, the message had been delivered with unmistakable clarity. You cannot hide Alex Eala on a side court ever again. And tournament directors around the globe took notice that tennis was experiencing a seismic demographic shift, with the Philippines leading the charge. Now shift your attention from the scorching heat of Melbourne to the humid electric atmosphere of Manila. Because instead of heading to Europe or returning to the Rafa Nadal Academy in Spain where she trains, Ella flew directly home for a reason that transcends normal tour scheduling. The Philippines is hosting its first ever WTA 125 event, and the timing couldn't be more cinematic. For decades, Filipino tennis fans survived on grainy, illegal live streams or expensive international flights to Singapore and Tokyo to witness professional tennis in person. But now the tour has come to them, and it's happening at the Rizal Memorial Tennis Center. Hallowed ground that has witnessed countless sporting events, but never a WTA-sanctioned competition of this magnitude. The Philippine Sports Commission, under the leadership of Patrick Poe Gregorio, moved mountains to make this tournament happen as their flagship project for 2026 and the face of the entire event. The reason tickets are selling faster than concerts by the country's biggest pop stars is the woman who broke Court 6 just weeks earlier. Ella arrived in Manila to a hero's reception that would make most celebrities envious. But here's the fascinating psychological element. Despite the chaos she caused in Australia, despite being named Co-Athlete of the Year alongside world champions from other sports, despite climbing to a career high ranking of 49, she maintains an almost eerie sense of calm and composure. Listen to her words at the pre-tournament press conference, where reporters practically begged her for dramatic sound bites about winning the title. They wanted promises and predictions and confident declarations, but Ella simply smiled and delivered a response straight from the Rafa Nadal playbook. stating that she never enters any tournament thinking about winning the whole thing, and that even though this event is on home soil, her mindset remains unchanged, focusing on taking it match by match and doing everything possible to win the first one. That measured approach drives fans absolutely crazy, because they don't want patience and process, they want coronation and triumph, but this exact mentality is what makes Eala so dangerous on court, because she never gets ahead of herself. Never allows the moment to become bigger than the immediate task at hand, displaying a maturity that seems impossible for someone only 20 years old, and explaining how she's handled pressure that has crushed countless other young prospects. The expectations surrounding her in Manila are suffocating. Her face appears on every billboard in the city. Every sports talk show dedicates entire segments to analyzing her chances. Social media platforms explode with predictions and prayers from millions of followers. And essentially the entire nation has pressed pause to watch one of their own compete at the highest level on home soil for the first time in history. Through all of this external noise and pressure, Eala remains centered and focused and ready. But before we preview the crucial opening match, we need to understand exactly why these expectations are so tremendously heavy and why her 2025 season represents one of the greatest rises in one of the greatest rises. Asian tennis history. Last year, Eala stopped being a promising prospect and transformed into a genuine predator on the women's tour. She didn't just climb the rankings through steady accumulation of points, she tore through the competition with a series of results that announced her arrival as a legitimate threat. She started 2025 ranked outside the top 140 and finished it inside the top 50, and the journey featured several signature moments that rewrote the narrative around Filipino tennis forever. The Miami Miracle stands as perhaps the defining moment of her breakthrough season, entering the Miami Open as a wild card, with critics dismissing her as too small and too inexperienced for that level of competition. And she responded by taking down 3 absolute giants of the women's game in consecutive matches. She defeated Iga Swiatek, the world number 1, then dismantled Elena Ostapenko, a 2-time Grand Slam finalist, and finally outplayed Madison Keys in a tactical masterpiece that showcased her evolving tennis IQ. Beating Swiatek alone would have been a career-defining victory for most players, the kind of result you build an entire highlight reel around. But Eala treated it as just the beginning of her run, following it up by neutralizing Ostapenko's legendary power game and outsmarting Keys in crucial moments that demonstrated she belonged at this level. Then came the Grand Slam breakthrough that every Filipino tennis fan had been waiting decades to witness. At the US Open, she became the first player from the Philippines to win a main draw match at a Grand Slam tournament. Finally breaking through the barrier that had frustrated generations of talented players who came before her. This wasn't merely about one match or one victory. It was about proving definitively that Filipino players belong the biggest stages in tennis, earning their place through merit and performance rather than wild cards and sympathy. The momentum carried into 2026 with Eala storming to the semifinals of the ASB Classic in Auckland just weeks ago, defeating established stars like Donna Vekic and Magdalena Frech in matches that weren't close competitive affairs, but comprehensive dismantlings that showed her level is insignificant. These weren't lucky wins or upsets where everything went right. They were dominant performances against tour veterans who have reached Grand Slam quarterfinals and finals, with Eala outthinking them tactically, outhitting them physically, and most importantly, outworking them in the crucial pressure moments that decide matches. She's no longer the talented junior who captured the US Open girls title in 2022. She's evolved into a tour-level threat with a complete game built around her devastating lefty forehand that finds angles most players don't even see. Combined with the relentless fighting spirit she absorbed during years of training at the Rafa Nadal Academy and the tactical sophistication of a veteran who has played thousands of matches. Her serve, once considered the weakest part of her game, has developed into a genuine weapon. Her movement on hard courts is exceptional, allowing her to retrieve balls that should be winners, and her mental game is where she truly separates herself from other talented players, possessing an ability to stay calm under pressure that seems almost supernatural for someone so young.